Today we're going to be continuing on the silhouette spoiler. Since you've last seen, I've taken everything apart. I think we had everything apart in the last video. I've also fiberglassed every single major face, so the top side and bottom side of every single piece has fiberglass on it. And now the next thing to do is to trim off all of the sides, and then we're going to wrap fiberglass around with a little bit of excess here. And the idea with that is that hopefully it'll give us a little bit more of a corner to work with, some extra material. I'm keeping these bolts in here, that way we can back these out after the fiberglass is in there, because obviously we have these holes in fiberglass, and fiberglass resin could get in there. We're gonna try and get as little as possible in there, but that way we can just back these things out and we have nice clear threads. And then while that stuff was drying, I was also taking off the rest of the trim. I had to take out every single window in the door. From there, I was able to take off this trim. So now we have zero trim that is going to be impeding our paint. So now we should have that much more of a quality paint job. Also, if you didn't notice, we did start to modify this trunk spoiler. Just the center section is where it's supposed to be. It's pretty much the exact same point as where I finished off on this thing. We just have to modify these sides, and then it'll pretty much be at the same exact point. Basically, I just made it thinner. You can see the Sharpie line here. I just made it thinner because it looked too thick. Obviously a lot of them come to a little bit more of a point than this. It's just I'd like to keep everything consistent, so I like to have this inch here with the inch here and the inch there, whatever, because it makes sense to me. I could have made it a little bit thinner at the top, but obviously just slimming it down, it should look good. And then we still have to do this whole side thing. That's going to be a ton of work in itself, but really I'm just focusing on this stuff right now, and then if we have time we'll work on that, get that finished up. I now have both of these sides very carefully set up, basically kind of like a stitch fiberglass, just to kind of get it all in there. I have fiberglass behind here, fiberglass behind there, and then a piece of fiberglass down in here, just to kind of keep it exactly where it is for now. Once that dries, then we can go in and fully glass it and make sure it's really, really strong. As for all this stuff, every single side except for this side here is fiberglassed. We're gonna have to set this thing up and very carefully fiberglass around these. I'm just gonna leave these bolts in here. We're not even gonna end up using these, but I'm just putting them in there just to save the threads again. But once this dries, we will set it up on the sides, trim this, and very carefully lay fiberglass all the way around there to fiberglass this in, just like we did with the bottoms of the sides.
Laying in your bed, fighting ghosts in my head. Wish that I could let you go. Remember all we had. How could we get this bad? Where did we lose our glow? You live, you learn. When your heart is set to burn, fading away until the light will return. Someone bring me back to the time when our hearts unite. Bring me back to the time when our hearts unite. you go. Remember all we had. How could we get this bad? Where did we lose our glow? You live, you learn. When your heart is set to burn, fading away until my life will return. Someone bring me back to the time when our hearts unite. Bring me back to the time when our hearts unite. Bring me back to the time when our hearts unite.
The silhouette spoiler is finally finished. I don't want to say finished because there's still a ton of work that still needs to be done. This is going to be a lot of hours on the air file, just blasting this stuff and making it completely flat. It's going to be pretty easy. It's just going to take a while just because there is a lot of surface area on this. I want to address a couple of things. I did a little oopsie here. I made the hole a little too big. I tried using too big of a drill bit and it really just tore up the trunk. After that happened, I stepped down to a smaller drill bit and it worked out a lot better. So all the other holes are pretty good. We're probably going to make the holes a little bit bigger, just that way it slides in and out nice and easy. That way we're not taking off any paint when we put the bolts in there, when we take it on and off after it's painted. And from there obviously have exposed metal, so I'm going to make the holes bigger than they need to be, just because obviously they're not perfect. I did make sure that they are basically parallel with the car and not with the trunk, because the trunk comes in and narrows as it gets towards the back. So you can see that there's less space here than there is here, and that's because these are perfectly parallel with each other and parallel with the car and all that. Everything else is working out really well. Obviously it's not completely bolted in. I just lightly put in, I think, 4 nuts on the bottom here, and then we just lightly screwed these in here. Obviously we're still going to get nicer bolts for these, and then we are going to have washers, of course, to displace some of that pressure across a larger area, just because obviously we don't want it to crack the paint once we really crank these down, because we don't want this thing moving around a whole lot while we drive it. Again, we might not drive with it on. We probably will. You know, it's not really that big of a deal. Also, on the underside, we are going to have to do some sort of washer system, because the underskin is all wavy and everything, and obviously the nuts can't sit up flat against there, so we're going to have to figure something out with a unique washer that's going to fit in there nice. Maybe I'll have to cut out the inner trunk skin and then put a fat piece of metal or something, that way it sandwiches this top skin that's really thin. I'm not exactly sure. We'll figure it out. This still has a long way to go, but at least you can see the main shape. I think it sits at a perfect level. I think it's a very reasonable height. It is a little bit taller than I think some of you guys are still expecting, and I think I was a little bit taller than I was expecting, but I think proportionally it's really good. If you take a look at a lot of them, the wing, you know, if you just kind of reference, obviously I'm just guessing here, but I think the wing is a good height, and from there you can see that this point here is usually a little bit taller, and then this length here is about the same as there. And so I tried to make it, you know, about as perfect as possible. Obviously I only have, you know, pictures and other sources like that. I don't have exact measurements, so I'm sure it's not 100% accurate, but it is about as good as it's gonna get, and I think it turned out absolutely perfect. Also, we are supposed to be getting our SSR Mark 1s back pretty soon, and we're gonna get some new tires on there, so hopefully soon enough we'll be able to get those on there, put the flares on there, and take this thing outside and really take a good look at it and see how everything is looking. You know, we'll be able to stand back. Obviously the space is not really that big, and it's hard to kind of, you know, create things when you don't have a big space, to really stand back and take a look at your work and make sure that it looks right from all angles. So we are going to do that in a later video once we get the SSRs and the new tires. That should be happening within the next week or so. Hopefully we can get those soon. Anyways guys, that about wraps it up for today's video. If you guys are interested in helping out the channel and the progression of this build, go ahead and pick yourself up some merch. It's greatly appreciated. Anyways guys, hope you enjoyed today's video, and peace out.